And we're live streaming. John DeLuper, I'm making you co-host.
Thank you.
And John, I don't see Katie here yet, but since you are my vice chair, I'll tell you I'm starting the webinar now and we'll start to see attendees joining us.
Okay, sounds good.
It does. I mean, I found it okay. You know, in general, I can't hear anything.
You know something? I had
What?
the urge.
All right, give me just a second. I'll pull up the agenda and then we can begin. All right, let me just share my screen. All right, you all can see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, very
Hey,
cool.
what's that noise in the background?
That was my phone. Looks like Katie was trying to join, but it's given some issues. So we'll begin the agenda. So first, welcome everybody to the Transportation Committee. Tonight, as usual, we have a full agenda, and I'd like to start first, if we can do a moment of silence for Jose Hernandez. He was a neighbor who unfortunately was killed on 4th Avenue. So we'll start with the moment of silence, and then we'll move on to attendance. So let's take a moment of silence. He unfortunately passed away on 4th Avenue at 59th Street. And we'll just take a moment of silence. All right, thank you. So let's move on to the attendance, and then we're going to do public comments after that. So Jeremy, can I ask you to call the attendance?
Sure. I'm going to mute everybody. And when I call your name, I'm only going to call committee members. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and acknowledge your name and then mute yourself again. If you are a board member but not a committee member, I am not going to call your name, but I will write your name down on the list. So let's start with Katie Walsh. John DeLuper. John, you have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Sandra Alfonso. Sandra
Present.
Alfonso. Thank you. Joan Body.
Here,
Thank you. Joseph Canale. Jerry Chan. David Estrada. Diana Gonzalez.
Present.
Thank you. Zach Jacy.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Roberto Martinez.
Present. Present.
Thank you. Marilyn Melman. Myra Molina. Gabino Morales.
Present.
Thank you. Sam Sierra.
Present.
Thank you. Cindy Vandenbosch.
Present.
Thank you. Julio Pena III.
Present.
Thank you. John, if I may, we're also joined tonight by Dimitri Johnson, who is the fellow who joins us from the Fund for the City of New York, who will be helping us with regard to BQE and Third Avenue studies.
Dimitri, we're very glad to have you starting this. Jeremy, appreciate the introduction. Dimitri, would you like to say a few words as well?
Yeah, glad to be here, and I look forward to this experience.
All right, well, you're joining us at the right time. We got a presentation on the BQE. Before going on, I want to move to, so Dimitri, we're glad to have you here. And then the next item on our agenda is public comment. So that's 3 minutes each. So I want to check, is there any hands raised for public comment? First public comment is the one for items on the agenda.
So members of the public, if you would like to speak, please just use the raise hand function and we'll be happy to call on you. Anybody from the public? Going once? Going twice? I see no hands up.
All right, seeing no hands, why don't we move straight into our presentations? So DOT, are your representatives here and ready to talk on BQE rerouting?
Hi, John. I believe we are. I see Jonine Kidder. I see Sally Stolberg.
Tanvi is here.
Tanvi is also here. Yeah, so I think the team is here.
And
Joe, I'll
who's
let you
going
take
to be
it.
sharing this screen?
I'll be sharing the screen.
I don't know who I is. Please just give me your
That
name.
is
Tanvi.
Tanvi. That's me.
Thank you.
Cool. So
All right.
Jeremy, let me know when they're ready with the screen share, and then
You could share your screen now, Tanvi.
Okay.
very cool.
Do I need to swap, Sally?
No, that looks good.
Okay. Okay, good evening and thank you for having us. We're going to go over some of the things that are coming up in the near term. As you might have heard, there's conversations about the longer term future of BQE, and tonight we will not be focusing on those conversations. As you know, there are separate outreach efforts already underway for that. This is more specific to the work that we have upcoming in 2023. We'll take a couple of minutes to explain why we're doing it the way we're doing it, because it is kind of important to understand why we needed these closures and why these detours are necessary before we get into the nitty-gritties of the detour. And then we'll have time available for questions depending on the rest of the agenda. So you're all familiar with the roadway for the most part. This is in the cantilever section that we need to do work. City owns the Atlantic to Sands portion. And that's where this work upcoming is. So, I'm not sure if everybody was involved in the conversations that were happening back in 2017, 18, 19, and so on. But there was a lot of studies that have happened on this portion of the structure even before we came on board. State was doing work back in the 90s and so on. So there's quite a big amount of study data available. But in addition to that, Our engineers have been inspecting the structure and walking the site every quarter to make sure that we don't miss anything. And I'm specifically saying this because there has been some concern about the safety. So we just want to make sure everybody's aware that this is probably one of the most monitored structure in the city right now. We have sensors that have been installed that gives us data on a daily basis. And the sensor data essentially tells us when something is out of the range that we expect for the structure. So it's not necessarily an alarm. It's more of a, hey, something happened here that's out of the range that we anticipate from all the previous experience we have with the structure. And 9 times out of 10, it turns out a battery died or somebody kicked the monitor or some such. But it's still good for us to have. But the data we're collecting, we're feeding the analytical models that we have. And so that tells us how the structure is behaving, if there's a change in pattern, if the deterioration is something that we need to pay attention to. In addition to that, one of the other aspects of the assessment is understanding what kind of loads we're actually carrying on the structure. So the truck weights that are on the structure, we had collected data since 2019. There's a lot of overweight trucks. So we then got the legislation passed last year, which allows us to do automated enforcement of truck weights. The system that needs to be installed for that has already been started. The installation has begun. So that in early 2023, we would be able to issue violations for overweight trucks. All of this to say, there's a lot of data available about the structure, and we're keeping a very close eye on it for safety and to lay out our timeline of when we need to have intervention. Which brings us to why these 2 spans now. So as we were doing all of this analysis, we identified 2 spans that needed to be addressed sooner rather than later. And this is, again, not a safety concern. It was more of a load carrying capacity issue. If we didn't address these conditions, we wouldn't be able to have some of the vehicles that we have on it. So in order to preempt that, we want to progress this repair effort so that we don't have to get to that point. In addition, there were a couple of locations that were identified by state who does an inspection every 2 years inside the Clark Street area, which I'll show you a couple of pictures shortly. So we took that opportunity to address those conditions. And then inside the Geralman Street garage area, deep inside, there's some conditions we need to address. So all of these items came up as needing to be addressed sooner rather than later, which is why we are doing this contract next year. So looking at it from another angle, it's this deck in roughly at Clark Street and Grace Court, section of the Queens-bound roadway. So the promenade's not affected. Staten Island-bound roadway doesn't have work on it, but there is some traffic management we have to do there. As far as the Clark Street area, so if you drive down Furman, you can see these great these doors inside the structure in the wall of the BQE. That's where the Clark Street subway lines are, and there's a emergency access and fan plant inside there. So that whole structure goes into the BQE, into this upper level. So that can only be accessed from the Queens-bound roadway through a manhole. Inside that chamber, there's these conditions that need to be addressed where this column has lost a lot of the concrete. There are some other concrete areas that need to be repaired. So we're going to take the opportunity of having the closures on Queens-bound roadway to access this chamber and also address these structural needs. Of course, this requires us to coordinate with MTA. There's no impact to subway service with this. It's simply a matter of coordinating with MTA because their equipment is located in the same area. So we have to work with them when we do the work. As far as the Geralman garage area, so if you come up or down Geralman, there's this garage door. When we go inside, there's these conditions where some of the concrete beams have lost concrete, the abutment has some cracks. There's some capacity issue there, so we are going to work in that area as well. There's no traffic implications with this by and large because the work is interior. So it doesn't really affect the traffic. BQE traffic is not affected with the work that needs to be done. So that brings us to what is really going on the deck that we need to address. So as I'm sure most of you have traveled on BQE, you know that at every joint, even as you're driving on the roadway, when you look up, you can see at about every 50 feet, there's a mesh and there's a joint area that looks more deteriorated than others. So as you're on the driving, you see it as either bumps or more potholes or whatever at the joints. Those areas are creating a capacity concern for us. So what we're looking to do is remove the concrete that has deteriorated, especially in the cantilever section, so this green space. Because when you look up from below, you can see that there's a lot more of deterioration that's obvious, right? So we need to take out the bad concrete, replace it with good concrete, and add some new reinforcement because the old rebars have rusted out or lost some capacity. So that's the work in essence that we need to do. And just looking at it from another angle, this is basically the blue is the old or deteriorated concrete that needs to come out. We have to add a few, the yellow dots are the new reinforcement to give it capacity, and then we'll replace it with new concrete. The challenge with this construction, just to go back here, because the way the structure is, we have to put this new concrete all in one pour at the same time, which is what requires us to close Queensbound roadway when we do that placement. So that's the specifics of how we're going to do that. I'll come to in a moment, but just so you understand why are we closing Queensbound roadway, it's because this concrete needs to be poured in one shot across the whole width of the roadway, and that we need to give the concrete time to get a little bit of strength before we can open it to traffic. And while we're doing that work on the Queensbound roadway, since the access into this Clark Street area is through the deck up here, crew will also be going down and doing the work. So there'll be, a separate crew dealing with this interior area in Clark Street. So in order to do this work, we have to do a lot of the prep during the overnight hours. So this would be, typically from 1 to 5 a.m., we're allowed to take down a lane. And so they would do the work in the one side of the road, one lane would be open. When we're doing some of this work to protect the traveling public down below, we may close that lane as well. But generally, there would be one lane open during that overnight hour. And then on a different night, we would close the interior lane and let the outer lane keep moving, right? So that's the prep work during the overnight hours. And in reality, we do that quite frequently during overnight hours for our inspections, for any other conditions that we identify that need to be addressed. So that's kind of our routine way of maintaining roadways in the city for the most part. But then there will come the first weekend when we need to pour the concrete in all of this area, right? This orange area. In order to pour all of this concrete, we need to have formwork down below because concrete, when it's first poured, needs to be supported. So at that first weekend, from Saturday 2 a.m. to Monday 4 a.m. is when all lanes on Queensbound roadway would be closed. Staten Island would be down to one lane. We would have to place these supports so that we can then pour this concrete. Once the concrete gets to a certain level of strength, we can remove the support, open up the Staten Island bound direction, give the upper level a little bit more time to cure, and then open it back up to traffic. And just to kind of to mention one thing that I forgot, when we're doing this overnight work, as we remove bad concrete, we will be placing steel plates during the day, when the work shift is over, so that during the daytime traffic keeps moving. So there will be some plates at certain times during this year of 2023. Subsequent to that, there is less removal to be done. So the most removal is directly adjacent to the joints. And then as we get further away from the joint, there's less concrete to be removed that needs to also be replaced. When we get to that point, same thing, there would be removal for a few nights, plates placed during the daytime. And then the second weekend will come along where again, from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. Monday, we would close the Queensbound roadway. Staten Island bound remains open in this next 2 weekend sessions. So that's basically the 3 weekends where there is the most traffic diversion needed. So just to kind of summarize, and also to explain a couple of things about how these weekends are picked, right? Obviously, with all of the things that happen in the city, whether it's the marathon or July 4th weekend and whatnot, there's only a handful of weekends where we can do this work to begin with, where, there isn't some other major event happening in the city. So these weekends are not going to be back to back. They will be spread out in the construction season from March, April to October, November, right? Depending on how the weather goes at the tail end. So what we have done is given the contractor all the blackout dates when they cannot do the work. They are then going to have to go look at their work schedule, their production rates, and come back and say, okay, out of the available weekends in the contract, here are the 3 weekends we think we can be ready to do this work. And so the preceding few nights is when they will do all the prep work, do the weekend work. Then you may not see much activity for a while until you get closer to the next weekend. So for instance, if they told us that the first weekend closure they want to do is middle of May, couple of weeks prior to that middle of May weekend, you might see construction activity every night. Then that weekend comes, they do the full closure, they get the replacement of the concrete done. Then you may not see a whole lot on the roadway because the next complete closure weekend is end of July, let's just say. So then they would, again, couple of weeks before that that end of July weekend, you would see a bunch of activity during overnight hours and so on. So these are not going to be nightly closure for several nights in a row. It's going to be sort of chunks tied to when these weekend closures are occurring. The contract has already gone out. Early next year, we anticipate having the contractor on board. The first thing they will do when they come on board is going to give us the specifics of which weekend they anticipate to do this work. We will then coordinate it with all of the other partner agencies. We've been working closely with, state DOT, MTA, New Jersey DOT, Turnpike Authority, Port Authority, Connecticut DOT, Thruway, all of them, to make sure that they're not doing something major that would create a conflict with our work zone. In addition to obviously making sure that none of the major events around the city are occurring at the same time. Because this will also take a massive amount of TE agents, some pedestrian management at certain areas. So, we need to work closely with PD to make sure they have the resources available to support this work. And then obviously there will be VMS boards all over the place. We will be putting up signs, the overhead signs structures that the Turnpike and state and everybody else owns will warn traffic well in advance to use completely different routes for those that can do it. So, go completely north or avoid this weekend to the extent possible and so on. So there will be a lot of effort and prep that will go into that first weekend, and then subsequent weekends, if something needs to be adjusted, we will adjust it. But in general, that would be a repeat effort then. So again, the weekends are going to be spread out. There's a lot of prep work in between. And, early next year, we will come back with specifics of which weekend we anticipate this work happening. And like I said, it's going to take a lot of effort to, the best thing we can do is try and keep people away from the area, out of the cars, out of, to the extent possible. Obviously, not everybody can do it, but to the degree feasible, use, alternate modes of transportation. And then for those who have to be on the road, we will have TA agents and pedestrian managers to make sure that certain areas that we know of that tend to have congestion on weekends anyway are being addressed. There will be some adjustment to lane configuration. Some of the local streets that are, especially in the downtown area, will have some signage where left turns are banned or certain parking areas are converted to turning lanes and things of that nature. We're also working with EMS and FDNY and so on to make sure that they are stationed in key strategic locations to make sure there's no impact to the emergency services. And for those who live nearby in that area, obviously monitoring the noise and dust and so on. So what does that really look like when we do the closure? So starting with the Staten Island bound closure, right? So the closure would be from Sands to Atlantic area. One lane would be open, right? And Furman Street would be the other route for the more local traffic. And then the Prospect Expressway into the tunnel will have the HOV configuration that it normally has on weekday AM HOV configuration to basically encourage folks to take the tunnel into downtown Manhattan rather than going through Brooklyn Bridge. So to try and keep people away from that area to the degree possible. For those who then are coming towards Staten Island bound that have to get that won't be able to get on at Sands, they will be routed to 3rd Avenue through Washington and Atlantic. Those who get out at Manhattan Bridge would be sent down 4th Avenue as well. So all of those 3rd and 4th Avenue will have several TA agents all over the place to make sure that traffic is moving, but also moving safely for everybody involved. And then lastly, traffic that comes out of Brooklyn Bridge that would go up Wine Street ramp, which will be closed, will go down to Furman Street and then come up and get back onto the BQE at Columbia Street, which will be converted to a 2-lane on-ramp. So, but the people who stayed on BQE and got on BQE earlier and is through traffic will stay on Staten Island bound and just keep going on BQE like they normally do. This is only for the people that are that would have got on at Sands or Artillery or our local to Dumbo or coming off of Brooklyn Bridge or Manhattan Bridge. Again, there will be notifications to people in lower Manhattan to use the Hugh Carey tunnel and avoid the whole area and stay on the highway that way. For the, so this is just a closer view of what like all the things that are happening in downtown Brooklyn area. This ramp at Columbia Street will be converted to a 2-lane on-ramp to get as much of the traffic back onto the highway as possible from Furman Street. And then, the rest of it is sort of more specific to this section of the roadway. So for that reason, Furman Street will be turned into a 2-lane in one direction. And then that will help process some of the local traffic. For the Queensbound roadway, the closure, in order to limit the amount of traffic that makes it all the way to Atlantic Avenue, the Prospect Expressway entrance ramp will be closed. Prospect Expressway itself is open. It's just the local traffic that would have got on to BQE at that point will be directed to take the detour so that they're not all coming off at Atlantic and trying to find their way around. So basically all of the on-ramps into that section would be closed. And then some of these local streets will be monitored and managed more. This is where some of the lane configurations would be changed, where turns might be banned, parking would be removed to help keep the flow of traffic from that area. And also trying to have primary routes that can be really controlled and try not to have, people using Google and this and that and just taking off in random directions. We're working with all of those GPS based routing to make sure that they don't send people down streets they shouldn't be and direct people to stay on the primary detour routes. So For the ones who came all the way to Atlantic, they would take Atlantic to Borum back to Tillery. Others that come from further out will be encouraged to take the 3rd Avenue all the way through so that they're not coming out at Atlantic and looking for a different route. And then there will be still some who will have got on to Prospect Expressway further south. So those will stay on and come out at Atlantic and then make their way back on at Tillery Street. So this is generally so these are the 2 map detour routes. Obviously, like I said, there will be people who will look to do other things. And to the extent possible, we will be encouraging them to stay on the designated routes. So this was one area where the freight route right now is this route. And it doesn't show up on our freight route, but it is a designated state route, and that's why it automatically becomes a freight route. We've had some input from other boards where instead of using the specific exit, there's some interest in looking at a different corner and so on. I'll get into that in a moment. So we are looking at that, and we are absolutely taking the input we are getting from the community on revisiting some of these detour routes. But just to close out this conversation, we'll get into that in a moment again. To make all of this work, obviously Manhattan also has to be managed for traffic to continue flowing as people get off Manhattan Bridge. If they can't get around in lower Manhattan, then everything backs up into Brooklyn. So we're going to make sure that we also have some traffic management strategies in lower Manhattan, turning some of the streets and having TA agents in that area as well so that people get out of off the bridges. So this sort of is like where we've been almost at this point because the plans have been completed. The contract was advertised. We are now in the process of going through the stages of procurement that are required. So some point early 2023, we will have a contractor on board who will then, like I said, give us the specifics of the schedule with the exact weekends, which we will come out and share with everyone. So summarize 3 weekends of Queensbound roadway closure sometime between March and October of 2023. They're going to be spread out. They're not going to be back to back. Geralman Street work can happen concurrently. There's no BQE closures, and we will be back with more exact schedule. If I could, because I know we got a lot of questions about this in the past, so if we could just take a moment to walk you through the alternate that we have already heard about and that we're considering, then that might perhaps answer some of the questions that might be in people's minds. So if you could let Sally share for a second, she has a slide or 2.
Jeremy, I lost being a co-host, so just want to let you know
I
that
took
as well.
care of it. Sally, you can
Okay.
share your screen now.
Great, thank you. I'll share the zoomed in one first. I think that'll make the most sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
So the what do you want to say? Solid line is actually the designated map right now of freight route. But we heard that this intersection around 5th Street is definitely not the preferred alternate for all of the neighborhood. So we are looking at this McDonald to Caton Avenue thought process. And so we're reviewing that, and we'll, at this point, the contract is already out, but making this kind of modification is not difficult. So we're taking input from the community boards in the area and the community, and we will make that modification as that makes sense. So just wanted to put that out there, that we've heard from several people, and we are taking that into account. So with that, we're available for questions.
All right. And Jeremy, I just want to let you know that Katie was able to join the meeting. So if you can add her as a co-host.
Oh, okay. Thank you. John, do you want to call the hands or should I?
I can call the hands.
Okay.
So first I see Joan Body.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, but could you elaborate a little more in detail of the Prospect Expressway closures?
Sure. So Prospect Expressway itself will be open. It will feed into the Hugh Carey Tunnel the way it does now during the AM HOV configuration. So this is purely to encourage people who are headed into Lower Manhattan anyway to take the tunnel rather than going to Brooklyn Bridge. So the Prospect Expressway is open, is just configured to head towards the tunnel for the HOV configuration. For those who don't take it, they would come out to Atlantic, have to get off and then go around the downtown area and get back on at Tillery Street onto BQE Queensbound.
Okay, so the Hamilton Avenue exit is not going to be closed. The 4th Avenue and Hamilton Avenue exits will not be closed. The 4th Avenue entrance will not be closed.
The 4th Avenue, let me go back to the presentation.
I can share my screen too, if that's easier.
Yeah, I can do that. So if you go into the slide mode, it's easier. Yeah, the expressway entrance at 4th Avenue will be closed. Right, that.
So the entrance on 4th Avenue.
Yeah, this will be closed.
Going, what would that be? That would be
going
north?
going
Queensbound.
Queensbound.
Queensbound will be
that. Yeah, so the red arrow indicates the closures. So this 4th Avenue entrance will be closed.
On
and
both sides will be closed?
No, just going
No.
Queensbound. Staten Island bound direction is open. It continues like normal.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sure.
I see Julio.
Hi. One, this was a very thorough presentation. I very much appreciate it. I have one, a comment, and then two, a question. One, the second slide that you put up about the suggestion on rerouting traffic from East 5th Street to McDonald, I think makes sense. I'm not a Kensington, or I'm not sure if that's Windsor Terrace neighborhood resident, but I feel like that would make a lot more sense. But I'll leave that up to the committee for further discussion. Two, this is more of a clarifying question. When you were discussing the closures and the modifications for streets and entrances, specifically the BQE entrance on Columbia Street, were you referring that that specific entrance would be 2 lanes? That would only be for the weekend closure, is that correct?
Correct.
And the Furman Street modification would only operate when the highway would be closed for that special weekend. All other times, those entrances and streets would operate normally, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So when we are using Staten Island bound, only 1 lane, and that's only the first weekend, because the second 2 weekends, there's no modification to Staten Island bound. That weekend, we need to use Furman Street as an alternate route. So in order to be able to get everybody back onto BQE at Columbia Street, we converted that to a 2-lane on-ramp to be able to feed that much volume. But that's only for that 1 weekend.
Okay. I just wanted some clarity on that. Thank you.
No problem.
I see Katie.
Yeah, and I'm sorry about joining late. Katie Walsh, I'm the chair of the Transportation Committee. I have a couple questions, and I will probably ask for your help to put the maps back up. But one of the things, the first is a question. One of the things that you talked about was the need to encourage people to not use their cars if possible. obviously during the duration of this project, but then on the specific weekends. My question around that is specifically targeted to achieve that. Would there be, would you create, have you considered, have you talked about creating free transportation during that time?
So this is only for the weekend that we would specifically be making the point of, avoid if you can kind of, right? Because the other work is all during overnight hours when we're at least open one lane. And generally we've done that without having any major impact on people who are traveling during the overnight hours. So this is only for the weekends. And I guess we're open to hearing that suggestion if there is a concentrated area where people need transportation from point A to point B, but to create a whole system for one weekend or 2 weekends might be challenging. But if you think there's a focused area where there tends to be this one need, we can certainly take that into account and talk. It's a bit challenging, to be honest, to do that for a weekend at a time. If this was going to be a sustained one, for sure we would have looked into that.
So for the weekends that are concentrated, that are going to be fully shut down, a solution and a way to get people to not use their cars is that you all should provide free transportation. If anything, I think it gives you an opportunity to see what that's like. But I think this is a major challenge, and you're trying to make sure that people don't use their car. And so I haven't, I would be, I'm posing this also as a question, but like, what else are you proposing except for like saying that, right? Like we encourage people, but like, what are you actually proposing to do? If you want to share what you've already considered, I'd love to hear that idea, but here's one solution that I think you should consider.
So, I mean, we're building off of experience from other projects through other cities, right, where they have had a short window where they needed to have drastic reduction in traffic. We can't do that on a long-term basis, but when there is a short window where there needs to be a reduction in traffic, really going out of our way to make those announcements well in advance. And we're talking to businesses and the different bids all over the place and making sure that they arrange their deliveries to the extent feasible at a different time and so on. It takes a small amount of reduction in volume to make a big difference in letting things work. So that's what was done at major work that was done out in Washington State with the Alaska Way Viaduct for 6 weeks. They told people to use alternate means, and that worked. That was all obviously every day, so they had other things in place as well. This was done at 405 out in California, Pulaski Viaduct, so in New Jersey. So when it's a short window, getting that word out and giving people time to plan alternate route does generally give us that little bit of reduction. But beyond that, there's a limitation on what decisions people make on how they get around. So there is only so much we can do to change people's behavior.
So the city of Boston is a really good example to offer for you guys to look at, where they provided free transportation during some major construction that they were doing. I believe it was to the Red Line and the Green Line. And so that would be, the things that I'm hearing you say so far are advance notice.
Right.
I think absolutely. That's why we wanted you all to come to this community board meeting, because we actually hadn't had a presentation yet. And so it was really important to us to have our neighbors know. So advance warning, but the second would be this. And I would, again, City of Boston, it's in the news specifically, and I'd encourage you to look at that. I don't want to take the mic for too long. I did have another question, which was specifically, might need the map up. So our community, if we're thinking about this, there's a couple places that it touches, but I just wanted to see 3rd Avenue again and better understand the anticipated impacts of density on 3rd Avenue. You know that this is the reported as the most killed and injured in Brooklyn. And I just wanted to understand again, if you could talk us through 3rd Avenue and just show that.
Right.
Like, what do you expect will happen on 3rd? Yeah.
Right. So for the weekend, that Staten Island bound is down to 1 lane. For the people that would have started out in Sand Street, in that area of Dumbo, those are the only vehicles that would add to this, to 3rd Avenue. Or those who would have got on the highway at Tillery. So those 2 entry ramps onto Staten Island bound roadway. So that's that and the Sand Street. Those 2 ramps will be closed. So only the people that would have taken those 2 would be going down either 3rd or 4th Avenue. The other direction, again, coming from 3rd or 4th Avenue that might have jumped on Prospect to go towards Queens would be directed to stay on 3rd and go through Flatbush and get back on at Tillery. So 3rd and 4th will get more volume, but again, it's a weekend. We will be talking to the businesses and the bids around there to try and limit the amount of trucks that are coming in and out of that area. And also we will have T agents like throughout that whole corridor managing the traffic so it doesn't turn into a gridlock situation. There are also certain areas that we will look into to, limit certain turns because that's what tends to back up traffic or create gridlock. So that whole corridor between where Prospect is and Flatbush will get a lot of effort from the T agents.
One of the major problems that we have that we know is shared by DOT is enforcement, where there is little to no enforcement at all by the NYPD. The 72nd is an example in our district. What will be different about this project? Why do we think enforcement will be better for this?
Well, enforcement in general, and that has to be sustained and depending on what level of enforcement that is, that's a separate conversation. And certainly, we can pass it on to our borough commissioner's office, and that's part of the whole conversation around the visioning that we're having and what needs to happen and input and so on. Specific to the weekend is, obviously, when there is a very focused and a need to do something, we have the T agents. We will have our own people driving around or walking, we'll have a few people stationed in various places and sort of reporting back if they're seeing issues at a particular intersection. We also have a TMC center, which is like where there are all these cameras, and the traffic management center sees where things are not working well. And so there will be a concentrated effort to monitor and see if something's not working. So for a weekend, where everybody comes together because there is a plan that needs to be implemented, we think we can make that be a priority for the weekend. But we fully hear you on your concerns on a regular basis. And that's part of the reason why the project is, overall that larger BQE and the neighborhood conversation is important. And we hope you all stay involved in that process, because one of the challenges of trying to do work in that area even though the project is between Atlantic to Sands, whatever decisions we make there does have spillback all over the place. And so we do want the broad engagement of people so that it's not, just a few people talking about whatever it is in their block or 2 blocks down when there's implications so much further out.
Yeah, and I'll pass the mic. We did apply by way of our vice chair applied to be serving on the advisory committee for the BQE revisioning, and we're not accepted by DOT. So sent a note about that we'd like to be represented, given that 3rd Avenue has the highest killed and injured in all of Brooklyn, and that there is going to be a 3rd Avenue trucking study and now the BQE rerouting. So just to be on the record that we've asked to be officially part of that advisory process, but we were not accepted. So, but with that, John, I'll pass the
Hi,
mic back to
Katie.
you
I
to
just
keep
want to make a
facilitating.
correction. It's a traffic study, not a trucking study for Third Avenue.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, no problem. And I'll pass back to you, John.
All right, thank you, Katie. I also see Zachary JC. Zach.
Yes, sorry, I'm on my phone and work. Thank you. Two things. I want to follow up on what Katie was asking about offering transportation, and I understand that this is not a mass transit project, so alternative routes, but in that vein, you need to make sure with how you're coordinating these weekends that there's no weekend subway service going on. That would be catastrophic, to say the least, because then nobody would be able to move anywhere. So that's another thing to make sure. I want to make sure that's on your agenda of things you look to coordinate.
Yes, it is.
My question is, you say that work only needs to be done to the Queensbound side, the upper level. Is this something that will eventually need to be done to the Staten Island side? And if so, why would we not do this work that we know we'll have to eventually do instead of talking about it for another 15 or 20 years and then having to go through this all over again?
So this is a very limited amount of work we're doing in very specific areas. The kind of work it would take to avoid like a full-blown project would be a full-blown project. So unfortunately, this is one of the examples we've used. If you, I don't know if you've heard of some of our previous presentations, there's 50-foot sections across this cantilever section. And so they're like piano keys, and as each key breaks, we can fix it, or we can fix a whole bunch all at once. The trouble with trying to fix a whole bunch all at once, there's so many other things that also need to be addressed that becomes a major project. And so with the approach that has been taken by this administration is, let's just figure out what it is that we want and get to it as quickly as possible, rather than keep doing repairs, and inevitably the next piano key keeps coming up. So we have time before we reach that point where we would have to do so many sections. If within that time we can figure out a longer term plan, then that's the best case scenario. Then we do one real project, come back with whatever it is that we all can live with or tolerate or whatever we want to call it. And then we're done. Then we're not coming back. If we do any kind of just repairs, it'll just keep going for a long time.
So this piecemeal project, which is maybe not to you guys, but to everybody else that's going to be doing this project, is a huge project. How long do you anticipate this work that you're doing?
So like,
I mean, when are we going to have this? We're going to have to keep doing this again and again and again and again.
No, as we were saying, the structure is deteriorating. There's no way to hide around that. But what we've identified are these locations that need to be addressed within next couple of years. If in that time frame we keep moving this visioning conversation and moving the project forward, then we will evaluate as things come up. Hey, if we anticipate getting into construction in 25, 26 with the full project, then we don't need to address some of the conditions. But if that window is just unknown and we don't know when a big project is coming, then we will have to say, okay, well, now let's lump a few other things that are concerning, or maybe just do a rehab because this is not moving forward. Let's just do one real major rehab project. So those are the decisions that will need to be made over next year or so. This particular thing that we're calling out, like I said, is 3 weekends with a couple of weeks ahead of it where there's overnight work. So while it's spread out over a year, the work itself is not elaborate. It's the managing the traffic that makes it spread out over a year. If we were living, I don't know, middle of Omaha or something, we would have taken a week, done the whole thing, and we would have been back, right? It's just the diversion of traffic and the limited work windows is what's making us spread it out over several months.
Thank you. That's all for me. Thanks, John. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you. I see Cindy Vandenbosch.
Hi, yes, thank you. I live in the area. I'm very familiar with the area of the East Fifth kind of McDonald's part of this plan. And I have, first of all, I'm sort of confused why traffic would be routed to East Fifth, where there's already so many issues with people speeding through that stop sign. The other thing that happens when vehicles get off at East Fifth is a lot of times they get frustrated because the traffic already now gets backed up all the way from the stop sign. And so people get frustrated when they pull off the expressway and they do an illegal U-turn, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They do like a 3-point turn, sometimes even trucks, and then they drive down Greenwood, which is very like quiet residential kind of street, but it's pretty dangerous when that happens, and that is currently happening. And of course, there's a playground right there. There's the park. There's the playground right there, and then there's the school on the corner of Fort Hamilton. There's bicycles, people bicycling to the park, coming along that stretch of Fort Hamilton Parkway. There's a library. There's just a church. I mean, to bring trucks down that route to me seems dangerous. But then again, I sort of have a similar question as someone who posted in the Q&A, which is how is it determined that East Fifth should be the route? And also, if you do change it to McDonald, sort of how are you evaluating alternative routes? Like what data are you using to determine these official detour routes? I think that would be really helpful for us to understand, because we understand this work needs to be done.
Right.
And I realize it's going to be on weekends, but still frequently we see traffic backed up all the way from the stop sign to the off ramp right there. And we also see trucks backed up at the previous entrance as well, but McDonald is one of the truck routes currently. So just curious to hear what data is going into this decision making and the possibility of shifting if that's backed up by the data in your evaluation.
Sure. Because that Kitten Avenue is actually a state route, it in the larger state map, it's an automatic freight route, which is how we were saying, okay, keep the traffic least on the local street, get them as quickly as possible to the designated freight route, fully understanding the points you're making. And we heard it from one of the other community boards as well, which is why we started looking at McDonald's. Is just there's that many more turns. So, we're evaluating, can the trucks make the turn? What other, management on that intersection do we need to do? There were going to be TA agents in that area regardless. We had, I think, 3 TA agents planned for that weekend in that intersection. So, we can shift them around to whatever makes sense with the McDonald configuration. So that's planned. And as far as how we got to that point, again, I think I didn't mention it earlier, but primarily that was only to people who might have headed towards the airports, and they were going to go out towards the LIE or something. So trying to say to them, listen, if you're going to go to LIE, go to Linden Boulevard, don't go into downtown and add to the already congested area we're going to have over there. So it's not that we're putting up a sign saying, hey, get off here. It's more like, hey, if you were going to the airports, consider taking Linden Boulevard. But again, the way we came to that is we looked at the volume of traffic. We collect data, traffic data all the time. We had pretty extensive models that we tested, and we, obviously real life is different, but we did have people go out and observe the conditions and make sure that they input that. Signal times are already inputted into that model. So they have, we tested it out to say, okay, does this reflect reality, or is this like model living in some theoretical world? So we did a lot of that effort, and based on what that looked like is how that route was chosen. But the lived experience obviously is really what informs what's the best way to manage in that corner. From what numbers we had last time. We actually had a slide that had the volume. It was only like if people actually listened to us and only those who are headed to the airports were taking it, it was a very small increase on the traffic that you already see. So it's not a huge volume increase. But again, understanding the already congested area, already if there's a backup, then looking at alternate just makes sense. We would just then, sign it accordingly, have TA agents available. And I think we actually did pass on the concern of that, because there was some mention of that median looks like it's also problematic. So all of that has been passed on to this traffic team and others who are looking at it to see, because those seem to be occurring regardless of what work we do and what signs we put up for our project. So that is being discussed separately.
And I guess thank you for that context. I just a few related questions. One is, people who, there are a lot of families and kids that are in that section along East Fifth. And if the plan doesn't change, how would people be informed within the community, as well as all along Greenwood? Because I realize that's not officially part of the route. But if you're going to have traffic enforcement that weekend, having someone positioned there, would be really important. And I guess in terms of like, I'm wondering about how people would be informed that are in this section of Windsor Terrace and Kensington.
Tanvi, do you want me to take a little stab at outreach?
Sure, go for it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jonine Kidder. I'm the Executive Director of Community Affairs here in Bridges. And we will have for this project at least one full-time liaison whose responsibility will be actually to be out there in the field and actually making those notifications. We actually had another call today with the person who we think will be working on this already to develop what we call the notification network, trying to gather our arms around all of the stakeholders in the community, which in this case will actually come down to physically walking down some of these major streets and actually going door to door and providing the notifications. We're going to reach out specifically as well to the bids and to the merchants associations and our civic associations and our PTAs and ask them to help us with making these notifications to the world. We plan to go out to the precinct community council meetings and to continue to come to your TC meetings coming into 2023. As Tanvi said earlier, we've already met with the fire department twice. We've met with PD more than once. We're meeting with the transit authority as well to make sure that, as the gentleman said earlier, they don't have any planned outages for those weekends. We're going to be just doing every outreach that we can work with hospitals and all of the business communities to make sure that everybody knows exactly what's happening.
And specific to your question about whether we're making that change of the designated detour route or not. I mean, at this point, I think we've just kind of said, let's just finish gathering input because we had a few more meetings to be done. So we'll just combine all that effort and say, okay, how do we address this, or what's our action item going to be? And then, for the early 2023, when we have a better handle on which weekends we're going to be using, at that point, we'll come back and also say, and by the way, here's where we landed on this intersection so that everybody will know in advance.
So all of that material is going to be print material. It'll be digital material. It'll be multimedia. We'll be tweeting. We have a very extensive Facebook program. We also have an extensive tweet social media platform, which is seems to be well used, particularly by the delivery services, which is one of the groups that I've been kind of concerned about what's going to be going on with FedEx and UPS and even Fresh Direct and all of those delivery services to be sure that they know what's going on as well. We're really reaching very deep into those communities to try to get the word out.
Okay, and just in terms of feedback, following this meeting, what is the window of time that people can provide feedback? regarding this sort of question around East Fifth or McDonald Avenue, and how can they share that feedback?
I don't know that we need extra feedback from Community Board 7, Tanvi. I think we've heard the concerns and
Right.
really taken a serious look at crunching the numbers.
Right.
It's not sort of like, you need to get a groundswell of people to back the idea. The idea makes sense. And we've agreed to take a really hard look at it. So I think Tanvi had said a couple of times,
Yeah.
we've heard the board and we're taking a look at it. So as far as Board 7 is concerned, we think we've got what we need to go forward with this analysis.
I guess from my perspective, I'd like to sort of speak to some neighbors and make sure that they're aware of this and have some input, some way to provide feedback beyond this meeting tonight. And so I'm just asking if there's a way
They can
to do
reach
that.
out to Emily. Yeah, I mean, stay in
They
touch
can
with the Borough
always-
Commissioner's office
They can always do that, but it's not as if you need to get a petition drive going or there needs to be some kind of huge groundswell of public support around the concept of taking another look at that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Because I mean, obviously you guys are the professionals here and the experts, but community input also really matters.
Right.
So much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, Cindy. I see Diana Gonzalez and then Jeremy.
Yeah, so then in terms of this decision about the East Fifth versus the McDonald's routes, what is the time frame for making a decision?
Well, it helps to have had this conversation for one.
Yeah.
So, it was one of those where we heard about this, we had that meeting. I'm honest to God, I forgot when we had meetings because we were in like meetings every other week with some community group or the other on this topic. So I forget when that was, but whatever that was, we heard it. We said, okay, let's, also make sure we hear all of the concerns from 7, combine all that information and then finalize our thought process. I don't think there is a whole lot in terms of like calculations. I just haven't had a chance to sit down with our traffic gurus and be like, are we good? We good? What do we need to change? But since the contractor is not coming on board till early next year, there wasn't like a rush to, 100% write this down because they won't be starting work till like February, March next year. So it's not something that we have put in the corner, but it's not something we're rushing out to get out to the world just yet, because we also sometimes benefit from hearing what the contractor has to say. So, sometimes it's helpful to just take a beat, just collect the data. But from what I have heard from all of the communities, it's obvious that that's the desired detour. So I just have to sit down with the traffic guys and say, is there any reason not to implement it? Because for us, it's no different, right? If it works and we can provide the TA agents to make the traffic flow and make it safe, we're fine with it.
So you don't have any time frame or guesstimate of when that decision will be finalized?
But before the end of the year, for sure, because we want to give specific direction to the contractor when they're making their plans.
Okay. And then when you make that decision, will you notify the relevant community boards, or do we need to actively follow up to find out?
No, like I was mentioning earlier, right? Once we have the contractor on board, we will also dial in on which weekends this work is going to occur. So we'll be doing another round of visiting all the community boards, or at least sending out some kind of materials. And so at that point, we would add this piece to it. But, certainly if there's concern or, that you haven't heard from us, you can reach out to Borough Commissioner's office and we'll make sure to get back to you if something is a concern.
I was
Okay.
just going to add that too. Emily is at every meeting. And so, there'll always be at least some update that we'll be able to give her since she meets with you every month. And we will also be working through our district service cabinets. They're very, very positive resources out in the community. We'll be reaching out to the board office for those contacts at all your cabinets and developing those contacts in our notification networks as well.
Great. And then in terms of having additional traffic agents there, is the how do the plans for that differ based on those two different routes?
I don't think we intend to change it unless, again, the traffic folks have a concern. We had planned on having 3 because we knew it was a heavy intersection. So chances are those 3 are going to stay. If there is, once we finish our review, if there is any desire to add, we might do that. But at this point, at least those 3 are going to stay in the area. It's just a specific location will shift around.
I think, Tanvi, we've also said that in real time, we'll have PD supervision out in the field. And if they feel the need is to move folks around because there's a bigger issue at a particular intersection, they will be able to move them during real time.
Right.
Great. And then those individuals would primarily be dealing with directing traffic and things like that, right? Not enforcement.
No, they're traffic control agents. Yes.
Right. So then I do want to iterate. I want to add myself to the chorus of the people who are concerned about East 5th Street and just feel that McDonald Avenue is a better place for trucks. But I also want to make sure that there is some sort of enforcement infrastructure in either location. My concern with the McDonald area is the fact that we now have a bike lane that leads to that spot. Now, I still think that's better than the East 5th corridor, which is like I'm terrified to cross that street, and I know I'm not the only one. And so I do want to urge you to do what you can to arrange for enforcement for speeding, for running the stop sign, for doing the crazy U-turns. You really see it all at that intersection. And also to reiterate that along the 3rd Avenue corridor as well.
Understood.
And also be conscious of the fact that if you've ever biked in the area, a lot the automatic like Google Maps bike routes send people to 3rd Avenue. And when you're interacting with the directions apps, you may also look at getting bike routes moved around so that they're being sent someplace else than all the other traffic.
That's a good point. Got it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Diana. Jeremy?
Thank you, John. I'd like some more specifics on traffic volume. I note when Cindy asked about the impact on the Windsor Terrace area, you gave more of a generalization, and even that had a qualifier of if people listen to you. But I also heard nothing about the impact on 3rd Avenue, how much additional traffic volume we could expect, particularly trucks. So if we could get some more specifics on that, I'd appreciate it.
The specifics of the additional traffic on 3rd Avenue, I'll have to get back to you on that because I don't have those numbers on hand. They're certainly in
Vitally important to this community because then we need to know where those trucks are going to go.
Okay, I'm talking about the general traffic that is being diverted. I don't have the numbers in hand. We will get it to you. The ones that we were talking about with the people headed towards Linden Boulevard, at peak hour, that would add 168 vehicles, out of which 22 would be trucks. The daily average is 1,121 total. The addition would be 146. So where normally, that's the average that there is. So
about a 12% increase.
Correct.
And truck wise?
22 trucks would be added to what's normally happening there.
And what's normally happening there?
146 trucks are normally there on an average.
And I want to just say
for
that's
the day.
peak hour.
Yeah.
Right, so about a 15% increase.
I don't know if 22 is 15% of 146.
I think it's close, but somewhere in that vicinity. The numbers for 3rd Avenue would be very important to us as well. If you could share those with us when they're available, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Jeremy, your hand's still okay. So I see Gabino Morales hand up. Thank you,
Hi,
Jeremy.
guys. Good evening, guys. I appreciate this presentation that you guys had with us. It's very thorough, and it is important that you guys have come to Community Board 7 so we could have our input, because it is important for Third Avenue also to be of concern for us for public safety and people who um, walk through those corridors of traffic, because there has been, as stated before, lots of incidents that have occurred, and people have died. So as for agents that are going to be there, or PD, we would like to make sure you guys implement and talk with them, so they could definitely be on patrol in those areas and make sure traffic flows easily. And for this whole project, we do appreciate you guys coming over and explaining everything to us. Please, if there's any changes, come back to us, and we would like to hear more about when projects are finalized. Thank you.
We'll definitely come back.
And I see Joan Body. Thank you, Gabino.
Thanks, John. We've heard about Fourth Avenue. We've heard about Third Avenue. What about Fifth Avenue? Have you taken any consideration in doing any traffic study of Fifth Avenue? Because when there's something going on the Gowanus, and Third Avenue is clogged and Fourth Avenue is clogged, everybody goes to Fifth Avenue. So I'd appreciate it if you guys would also put in your traffic studies, Fifth Avenue. Thank you.
Appreciate that. We do have Fifth Avenue built into our model. However, it's not a designated official route. Fully understanding that people who are local to the area certainly know even if we talk to Google Maps or whatever and tell them not to send people on other streets, people know their way around. They're going to go to other streets, but it is not going to be mapped as a detour route.
One last thought. Red Hook has, if I'm not mistaken, 2 Amazon distribution centers. Now that means there's more trucks in the neighborhood. So your studies may be all well and good, but there's going to be a big increase in Amazon trucks. There's another facility going to be built on Third Avenue, and that's going to be coming online before you turn around. So whatever your numbers are, increase them by 25, 30%. Thanks.
We like Jonine was mentioning earlier, we will be reaching out to all of those larger facilities, and at least for the weekend, trying to work with them to have them plan around those weekends and reduce the amount of deliveries they do. All of us collectively and those who live in the area hopefully will consider doing Amazon day delivery rather than wanting things to be delivered on the day off. Let's reduce the requests we make of these, but we will speak to those larger facilities and see what they can do to at least avoid the weekend. The larger conversation on a day-to-day basis, that's part of the conversation that has already started.
Yeah, we're actually scheduling meetings like this with the entire freight industry from, as Tanvi said earlier, the Bronx, College Point, all of the communities that we know have kind of large footprints, Long Island City, Hunters Point, where there are large footprints of trucking people that may not be part of a bid or a business organization, but through the freight industry connections that we have here at DOT. And we are meeting, even making presentations all the way up into Queens and Staten Island as well, so that those communities know also.
Thank you, Joan. Jerry, I see. Jerry Chan.
Hey, thank you. Apologize for joining a little bit late. So my question is study that you guys are planning. Are we planning to do the study in the Asian community too? Because there's a lot of trucks coming in and out that area too. When I'm talking about the 6, 7, 8 Avenue.
Exactly,
on
one of the
Sunset Park.
groups. Yes, that's exactly one of the groups we've been looking to make connections with through the business community that's there. We know there are very active small business communities there. And if you have contacts in those communities for leadership in those communities, please share them with us so that we can do outreach to
it's
those
him.
communities. We do have, that's great. No, we do have the capacity to print material in many, many different languages and actually have staff be able to go out and speak to people. I know a lot of small business owners maybe do not feel they're as proficient in English and want material in their own language. We'll be happy to get together with you and have a conversation about meeting those needs.
Perfect. So the conversion that was planned last year to convert the street and a lot of sign would change to truck parking and stuff. Those parking is turned into not truck parking and turned to a garbage dump. So I'll be happy to get not just me, right, some of the organizing folks in the community, along with the chair and the co-chair of this CB7 transportation chair, to sit and talk about it, because we need to talk about it.
I know that the conversions that were proposed last year did galvanize a large group of small business people out there in the community. And we're happy to set up a conversation with you about what you can share with us is the best way to reach people. We want to learn, we want to learn from you. What is the best way to reach them? Is it digitally? Is it in print media? Is it door to door? We can set up a conversation for you with that community.
Perfect. And the number one step is to find someone that speaks the language, because I'm not planning to do any translation. Whether it comes directly coming from the mouth of DOT rather than the mouth of Jerry.
We do have the opportunity here within DOT to do translations into many languages. We use external certification services to make sure that we are using correct phraseology and particularly idioms with small business people. We do and have used traditional Chinese as well as simplified Chinese, as well as doing things that we recorded for people who may, again, not have the formal education to read those languages anymore, but don't feel proficient in English either. So if you put your contact information to Emily, I'll be happy to set up a call with you.
Perfect. I'll work with the chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll, John, I can jump in and keep us going from here. And I just want to say, Joanne and Tanvi, will we get this presentation from you guys? You'll send it to us with your contact information for
I
Joanne's
did just, in the chat, if you look, I can put it again. So I'll throw it in right now with also some information about the larger vision and conversation, but I'll put back in the chat.
Thank you. And that includes the contact, right, to follow up?
The contact, if you don't mind, it's easier if you do it through the Borough Commissioner's office, just so that it doesn't get lost in all the general email that we get. They kind of aggregate and make sure that we stay on top of it and follow up with us and so on. So if you could stay with the Borough Commissioner's office with Emily, that would be helpful.
Okay, great. There might be some follow-up after this meeting, further discussion, but for the purposes of tonight, thank you all for joining us and speaking at Community Board 7.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Katie,
you all.
We haven't gone to the public yet.
Say it again, Jerry. Say that we didn't hear it.
So we haven't asked the public if they have questions yet. We just did board members.
Oh, thank you. I apologize. I joined a little late, so my sense of order is off. There was we meant to have some public comment at the top.
No, we did. I just meant about this presentation.
Okay. Jeremy, were there any questions that came in from the public?
I believe they were answered through Q&A. I believe certain board members picked them up.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for facilitating. I'm unfortunately tonight just joining from my phone, but Jeremy, if you see anything else that you wanted to flag, so I'm just just to like, where are we in the presentation? Where are we in
I
the
just
meeting?
wanted to ask any members of the public if they have some questions for DOT about this presentation, please raise your hand and we will
Okay.
call you. Seeing no hands, going once, going twice. Sorry, I just cost you 2 minutes.
No, it's okay.
No worries.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, for that. Okay, thanks everybody. But we will likely have questions. We will likely have questions from the public. And the route that we'll take is by way of going through Emily, through the commissioner's office. So thanks for joining. And still, everyone else, we're still here. We still have another agenda item, specifically with DOT, and then we have some old business that we need to cover. From the 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue presentations that were on October 6th, and then we have public comment again. But Joanne and Tanvi and Sally, thanks again for joining for the presentation. So we're gonna go to Emily, back to Emily. We're gonna go back to Emily, and Emily, you're gonna let us know who's next, but I'm just gonna just do like a short introduction, and then I'd like you to fill in the gaps. On September 15th, we got a message around Brooklyn car share, the Department of Transportation's New York City car share program, with a request to put in car share parking spots on 45th Street and 44th Street. So on 45th Street, between 5th and 6th, I believe it's 2 spots. They'll tell us more. On 44th Street, between 5th and 6th. Just again, this was a pilot the DOT had done for a car share program. They're going to talk about it with a request to park these cars on these streets for the car share parking spaces. We sent a list of questions already through before this presentation to Emily by way of the car share program to learn a little bit more. How were these spots selected? What was the criteria? What outreach has already been done? What outreach has already been done specifically in our district? Who benefits from these? Who are the potential users? Are these electric vehicles? Are these fossil fuel cars? How does this get evaluated? How does street cleaning work? What happens if they can't find a spot? Who does enforcement? So there were a lot of questions that we had sent through that we asked DOT and the program to address in the presentation. And we have a presentation tonight, and then we'll have a discussion after that. So with all of that context, Emily, can I pass to you to introduce?
So you can actually pass it over to Adrienne Moretz. So the presentation tonight will not be given by New York City DOT. It will be given by the contractor of the electric vehicle stations, which is Adrienne.
Emily,
but we also
Justin
have
Romeo.
Justin on the line as well, who is also from DOT.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of an intro before, and then I'll be there to help with answering questions.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Vehicle, we're doing the car share, right? Tonight. I don't know about an electric vehicle.
No, it's car share. Sorry, it must have been misspoken. Yeah, no, this is a car share program.
Yeah, sorry, it's car share. My bad.
Okay.
No worries. Okay, am I good to share the presentation? Or may I have access to share the presentation?
Give me 1 second.
Yep.
And you can share now.
All right. Can everyone see
Yes, we can.
that? All right, so thank you. I'm here today to give introduction, and then Adrienne will give some more information about the expansion of the permanent car share program into Brooklyn Community Board 7. My name is Justin Romeo. I'm the Director of Special Projects in the Transportation Planning and Management Division within DOT, and the program is housed within my unit. We did part of the program starting in 2018, where we worked with Zipcar and Enterprise to just determine how useful it would be to supply car share vehicles on street in various neighborhoods across the city. As a result of that pilot, we saw that there was really overwhelming usage of the vehicles, 24 trips average per month and 17 different households using those vehicles. So that's exactly what the intention is behind the car share program. And then, I'm sorry, stepping back a little bit, just the idea is that car share has the ability to supply vehicles on a sort of short-term basis. So thinking like your traditional rental is a couple of days, where this is more in the level of hours. It can go up to days, but it allows for if you need a car to go to the grocery store or need a car to go to a trip to a friend's house, that you can have that car available, and then we're providing on-street space, so you will have somewhere to park that car when you come back. It's an added benefit. We also saw just generally car share like is good at reducing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing the miles traveled by individuals. And that through some research done around the program, we saw that there was some car shedding that happened in terms of getting rid of cars and in terms of like suppressing in terms of not buying cars for New Yorkers who were involved in car sharing opportunities. So there are 2 sites being requested. Each site contains 2 parking spaces. It's at the corner of an intersection. It's going to be the first 40 feet. And we sent along the exact spaces. But now I'm going to turn it over to Adrian to give a little bit more detail about Get Around, that there's a partner who are going to be operating the spaces if they are awarded. And you can tell you more about the company and also about some of the outreach and some of the sort of equity things that they're looking at and thinking about in terms of car share operations.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Justin, are you going to advance the slides or? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian. I work on government partnerships at Get Around, which is a car share company. So I get to work with cities across the United States to bring shared transportation. Go ahead, Justin. I just want to tell you a little bit about Get Around, and we can share this presentation. We're a round trip car sharing company. So our goal and what we do is providing affordable and accessible shared cars to people who need them to live and work. We've been around since 2009, and we are in almost 1,000 cities across the globe, mainly in the United States and Europe. It may be small on your screen, but we do sometimes get asked about the tiny purple dot at the top of the screen. That's Svalbard, part of Norway. So we have quite the span. But over that time, we've seen 6 million trips that people have taken on Get Around. Okay, go to the next slide. So we are different than a traditional rental car company, meaning that Get Around is free to join. There's not membership fees, there's no monthly recurring fee. And like Justin was saying, car share is perfect for short trips. So you can use Get Around for as little as 1 hour. You're not obligated to have a car for an entire day. So you get it when you need it, and then you return it to the same spot. Perfect for things like groceries, doctor's appointments, meeting with friends, going to a meeting you can't reach with transit. So how do you use Get Around? You upload your driver's license to our mobile app, and then you can book a trip on the website or using our app in just a few minutes. So it's pretty instantaneous. You don't really have to wait for a membership card to come to you in the mail or that sort of thing. Get Around is also contactless, meaning that we install a device into all of our vehicles that allows you to lock and unlock the vehicle using that app. So you don't have to meet with people in person. You're not waiting in line to get a car. You don't have to coordinate picking up car keys with anyone. And much like other car share companies, of course, all of our cars come with insurance and customer support. So really, that means we have 3 big objectives or goals we try to reach. Go ahead, Justin. And I'll talk through each of these line by line. So at the top, we really want to be an equitable mobility solution. So meaning that we provide transportation options for anyone and everyone in the city. We then want to reduce congestion, free up the curb space, get cars off the road, and be friendly to the environment. So really, we just want to complement other modes of transportation in the city and be part of the ecosystem, if you will. So starting at the top, equitable mobility, we see we have a large portion of people of color, people that are lower income, and people that don't own their homes, meaning they're renters that use Get Around. In the second line, we see if people do have a car, when they get access to car share, they decide to sell or donate their vehicle. That's something Justin also mentioned that they saw in the pilot program, but we've seen that Get Around as well. If you have a car, we see that people use it less, their personal car, if they have access to car share. And if people do not have a car, they decide not to buy one if they were considering it because of access to car share. And then finally, we know that car share takes 9 to 13 personal cars off the road, again, freeing up the curb space. So if we have many people sharing a car instead of everyone owning their own, then that's less cars on the road generally. And, to really help the environment, we see that the majority of our trips have more than just one person in the car, 2 or more people. So not only are you sharing the car, you're also sharing the trip. And so because of that, we see a reduction in greenhouse gases. And again, we see people, that actually don't own a car at all use Get Around. So what does this mean really for your community district? Go ahead, Justin. It means when we're looking at locations for car share, we consider multiple things. First is co-locating with other modes of transportation. We like to be close to things like bike share stations, subway, ferry, any other mode of transportation. Again, we really try to be a complement to those other modes. Another thing we look for is visibility, meaning that we know people find out about car share just by seeing the car share vehicles and signs on the street. 30% of people find out about car share just by seeing the signs in the cars. So we know a lot of people don't know about car sharing, but find out about it because locations are in visible areas. And that helps with safety if they're located at well-lit, well-traveled intersections. So through this program, the DOT car share program, Get Around has been preliminary approved for locations on the street in all 5 boroughs. So today we're just going to go over the 2 locations in your community district. You can go ahead, Justin. So there are 2 locations, like Justin mentioned. I know the map looks very zoomed out, but I'll go over each of them. So again, there's 2 locations, and each of those locations will have 2 vehicles, so a total of 4 cars. And like on the screen, right, our goal is to provide an opportunity for more people to use car share and have a transportation option if they don't need it, or if they're living a car light or car free lifestyle and they choose to use car share. This area is considered an equity zone that DOT has identified, which just really means that's where affordable transportation services can have an even bigger impact. So another reason we chose this area. So going over the 2 locations. So the image at the top is a screenshot of where the cars would be potentially located, right adjacent to NYC Optical. So that's it's on 45th, but very close to the 5th Avenue intersection. The second location right below it is across from the park. So on 44th Street, also very close to the 5th Avenue intersection. The reason, just to reiterate again, why we chose these locations, the one right beside NYC Optical, that's a block from the subway and bus, close to the park, and it's 2 blocks from City Bike. Similarly, the next location on 44th Street, again, close to the park, close to the bus stop, and even closer to City Bike station. So we can go ahead to the next slide. What does that mean for your residents? How do people find out about car share and their options? So in consultation with DOT, we've created an equity and outreach plan to do exactly that, to connect with community in your district and to spread the word just to as many people as we can that car share is a transportation option. So we're offering different levels of discounts for everyone in the city. The first is just an intro to car sharing, meaning it's a first-time discount if you want to try out car share and haven't used it before, you get a discount. We're also partnering with community organizations where their constituents would get discount access to car share. So for example, a food pantry that has volunteer drivers, they could get a group of discounts for that, or like a little league that needs to transport not only players, but also equipment, or a senior center that needs to help transport seniors to different appointments or locations. So partnering with community is very important to us, and we really look forward to your recommendations on who we might reach out to. And then also making sure we can have car share be available to everyone. And so providing discounts for those people on public assistance. And so that would be a recurring discount, not just one time, where people who are of low income in NYCHA properties or using SNAP can get a recurring discount. And then, of course, we plan to collect regular feedback on how the program is going. If the spaces are well utilized, we'll be working with DOT on that, reporting monthly, and just really trying to understand how we can continue to grow and improve. But we'll also do some traditional marketing too, right? Social media ads, digital email campaigns, radio to help spread the word. And we can provide digital materials to you as individuals or businesses as well to share. So with that, I could go ahead, Justin. I think it's another slide of just the addresses of each of these locations. I'm happy to answer questions about Get Around, and Justin's here to answer questions about the program itself.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. All right. So I'm going to preempt because I'm sure people have their hands up, so please do. So some of the questions that we had sent through, I'm hoping you guys got these. I didn't hear them in the presentation, so I will kind of directly, so I'll just kind of call them out. There was a pilot that was done in 14 neighborhoods between 2018 and 2022. As far as I know, I don't think the pilot included Sunset Park, included Community Board 7. You guys can correct the record, but so we were not in the pilot. So I just want to include that. The second thing I wanted to say is that these are not electric cars; these are fossil fuel cars. Our community has a very high, if not the highest, asthma rate and air quality. We should be making all of the transitions for cleaner air fuels. These are the cars that are coming in are fossil fuel cars, which is problematic. So I'm just going to put that on the record. The other thing is that I'd love if you guys can say if you already talked to anybody on the block or in the businesses, just hear that reflected. And then there are two other comments, which is that there's income being associated against this, right? So there's fees, there's permits and fees. That money goes to DOT. And then, of course, there's the money that is going to be funded by people signing up for memberships and using these. So as it is, just keeping in mind, again, that this is the company, this is a company who's using these spaces and, in terms of using them in assets that are going to be income generated. And then the other thing is enforcement. DOT has been on the record with us that enforcement is a big problem. And so we have concerns about enforcement of things like, and I'd love to hear your guarantee around street cleaning and street sweeping and understanding if these cars are just going to sit and how it's going to happen, because we have literally no enforcement that happens at all. And so this is a major concern. So there's a lot of things in there. We did send these ahead of time though, so you guys did get the heads up. So if you could just respond to any of those, and then I'm going to open up to questions.
Yeah, I could definitely respond and say I'll make sure I got them all right. So I believe yes, Sunset was not part of was not part of the pilot. The second question, I believe you were asking about electric vehicles for operation, and I think they're electric vehicles, and Adrian can maybe say some more about the electric vehicle mix in the Get Around fleet. Currently, we are trying to figure out like how we could move electric vehicles into the program. Charging is the issue. And so having charging availability on the street, we don't have a lot of that currently, but there are programs in DOT that are working to increase the on-street availability of charging for electric vehicles. And we'll be in continued conversation with those groups as well. And we hope in the future to the program to increase the mix of electric vehicles as well. What was the third question? I'm sorry.
The third question, it was more of a comment, which is just around, and I guess the question that we asked was, is there going to be any community benefits for our community for the income that's going to be generated from this project? You know, there's going to be income going to the car share company and income going to DOT for the permitting process, but like, what is the income generation that's going to come back to the community? We didn't get a response. I mean, I think the closest you guys are saying is something like benefits. But like, what is the sort of investment, you know, that you're making basically to be able to do this in our community?
So I would say the investment, it really is the spaces and really is the program. Like the idea is that we are bringing this new transportation option to the neighborhood, and I understand it takes away from some of the availability of parking, but as we saw in the pilot, like these are being used by multiple families. So it's the idea is that it's not a parking loss, but really like a benefit for the area. And part of the reason that we're running the car share program is because there are not really places to put these cars in some of the sort of Manhattan locations. That's where a lot of them were concentrated before the pilot. And the idea that we wanted to make sure that this was a benefit that was like able to be used by many more and kind of all across the city. And just from a financial standpoint, like the money is going back into the general fund for the operations of the city. It doesn't go to like DOT's like specific, we don't earmark the money to go to any specific program. Like it goes back to just support the general operation of the New York City government.
Okay, and then the last question was on enforcement, like street sweeping. So how do you, like, who's going to be moving it and making sure that they're adhering to street sweeping? We already have a big problem in New York City, but a big problem in our community around like trash and sanitation and not having enough pickup and having too much trash and not having enough disposal. And this is just a major issue in the community. So how are you going to guarantee that street sweeping is going to be honored?
Yeah, so they don't have to move the cars for street sweeping, but they are responsible, the car share companies are responsible for maintaining the space, and they have to provide maintenance reports to us on the same cadence that there would be street sweeping on those locations. And so please reach out to the Borough Commissioner's office if you find that there's an issue with the space, and that's something we will definitely take seriously, and we want to make sure that the spaces are being kept clean and not collecting garbage and debris.
Okay, so I'm going to move on, but I just want to clarify two things. Is that this is a request? I just want to make sure you're not, this meeting is not about you informing us, right? This is a request for these spots. Can you confirm that?
The spots have been, so we set up the program, whereas the car share companies make a request to DOT for a certain number of spaces all throughout the city. We have
you have 45 days to provide us comment from the time that we sent you the original notification.
Thank you, Emily. I was just going to add one other piece and just say, we have some like requirements that were put out with the application in terms of where these spaces could be sited. So we did a preliminary review of the spaces, and now we are bringing those spaces to the community boards. And then Emily's statement follows.
So, all right, so we got this from you on September 15th, and we asked for a meeting right away. And this was the first available date. So what is 45 days from September 15th?
I don't have it in mind. Yeah, but I believe it's coming up.
Actually, Sunday.
Can you, DOT, can you just confirm what date it is?
Can we do that too? Like just not live? We'll do the calculation and make sure we look at the proper date that the letter was out, and then confirm the 45 days after.
Okay, but so we just to say, like, we got this letter on the 15th. We requested a meeting as soon as possible. This was the earliest that you all could do. And so what I want to make sure that before the meeting is over, we're all really clear on the fact that we're still within this window to be able to.
Yeah, you are
feedback.
within the window. Yeah.
Okay, but you're basically saying we have we have like 3 business days.
So you had, once you receive the letter, you have up to 45 days to request a presentation to give comments. If you went past that 45-day window and we didn't receive any of your comments, then that's just the legality of it. While we accept your comments, that's just what the hypothetical situation would have been.
Okay, so just before I open up to everyone else, we're in the moment, we're in the period of time in which we're providing comments, and that we can basically, so it is, we're not being informed, we're being requested. It's really important that we make that
So this
clear.
is informational.
Emily, can you just walk everyone through, are you informing us that this is what's happening in the community?
Yes. I can provide you I will show you the original email that I will forward you the original email that I sent you, in which it was stated you had 45 days in which to give us comments or request the presentation. The presentation would have been informational.
So we're still, are we at the chance that we can say, we don't think these spots are good, we want to make a change, we want to be able to recommend X,
Yes,
Y, and Z?
You still have that time. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So with that, I just hope everyone now is on the same page that that's what we're doing right now. Wow, there's a lot of hands up. Okay, I'll just go to John and then I'll go from there. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Katie. So I also had several questions about this process, and I wanted to follow up on the enforcement issue. First off, if these spots are chronically blocked by cars that are not part of the service, what happens then? Do the people who drive the cars, get fined? Do you have to report it like you do a blocked driveway and hope that the police will issue a ticket? How does that whole process work? And I'll have a few more, but I just want to hear that.
Okay, yeah, from the enforcement perspective, the zones are counted as an outstanding zone, so you can be ticketed for parking in a space if you are not a car share operator, if you're not a car share vehicle. The cars for the car share program are street legal cars, so they can be parked in other places in the program. They do report the block spaces to us, and while the cars are not forcefully removed, we do monitor that and work on increasing or sort of decreasing the occurrence of that. Part of the program does allow for painting of the spaces with a car share parking only and an outline for the space, and there is specific signage for the spaces as well. We saw that with the installation of those the pavement markings, that the amount of block spaces greatly reduced during the pilot, and that's why something that we carried forward.
Okay, and then the next is, so you mentioned earlier that there was Enterprise and Zipcar as well. These are part of the same program, but they're not asking for spaces. It's only Get Around right now. Is that right?
So Get Around is the only company asking for spaces inside of this community board. Zipcar has requested other spaces. Enterprise is no longer in the program, but we do have a third partner, Truckit, who has also requested some spaces, just not in your community board.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing I wanted to know was the cars are all registered in New York, and they're going to be. Is there going to be a fee that they're paying the city, or is it subsidized in any way by DOT or by other city agencies?
We do not have a registration requirement as a part of the program, and there is a fee that the companies pay for the spaces.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The email that I had, I think it was like 450 is the permitting cost of what they pay John. That's the email that we got back.
475.
475. Okay, yeah. Cindy and then Jerry after that.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question related to accessibility. I just went to Get Around's website and I don't see that I can search for accessible vehicles. And I'm wondering, so that's one thing is if an accessible vehicle is needed, you know, what can a person do and can they use the service? And secondly, on a related note, if you have an accessible parking placard, can you use that if you're using one of these vehicles?
Yep, I can take that question, Cindy. So yeah, you're correct. There's not a way to sort for accessible vehicles on our website. If someone is interested in using an accessible vehicle, though, we will make a hand-controlled vehicle available within 48 hours. And if someone needs an accessible vehicle, just because we don't have a filter, it may exist on our platform. So we have a customer service support that's 24/7 that an individual could reach out directly. The accessible placards, I'm not sure about that. I don't know if Justin, you know, but I might have to get back to you on that question, Cindy.
Yeah, I mean, are you saying like while someone is like has a vehicle out for rental and usage?
No, I mean, I'm just thinking of people that have like that have an accessible permit, right? Can they use it if they use this service so that they can park in accessible parking spots?
You know, I'm not 100% sure if that's tied to a specific license or if it's tied to a specific individual. But I think we can do some research on that and try and get back to you. But if they can use it in another car, like this is just another like street legal car. So as long as it's not tied to a particular vehicle, then they should be able to use it. But I'm just not sure in terms of the policy around using those placards in the city.
Okay.
Cindy, tied to the individual, I could let you know that for a fact.
Thank you.
So if tied to the individual, you can't transfer it to another car. You have to actually put a change of license plates in.
Okay. Okay.
So I not help.
And then I guess my last question, I went to the website just trying to find accessibility information and I didn't find anything. And so I'd just like to make a request that there's this information that you can actually request an accessible vehicle is, you know, even if it's a standard practice to put accessibility at the bottom of your page in your sitemap so that people with disabilities don't have difficulty knowing that there's actually accommodations for them.
Yeah, that's a great feedback, Cindy. I'll make sure to make note of that, especially with the hand control vehicle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll go to Jerry and then Cynthia and Diana after that.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions and stuff. Right, let me start off by asking the question about the date. You mentioned September 15. You sent a letter and we got 45 days. Do you mean 45 days business day or 45 days calendar day? Because you know this is very clear, right? Because if it's business day is beyond October 30th. That's the first question.
It's the 45-day mark is October 30th.
Okay, so it is calendar days, not business day. Correct. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So my second question, I apologize for repeating the question, is about, you know, what does the first question is, right? I know you never did a program in the Sunset Park area, right? Have you guys did a survey within the community, right? Really did a survey in the community and asked them, do they need those service, the car ride service?
No, we have not done a specific survey, but I believe that agents should be able to give some information about their general usership in the city and why they pick these spots.
Yeah, but I understand that, right? I understand that, right? Anything put, I could have some kid do research for me all day, but is research is different from kidding the ground and talking to the resident in the neighborhood, right? Well, you know, what's my question leading to that is, right, you are taking space away from there's a lot of family living in the neighborhood. Yes, great that you guys have a 2 parking spot near subway station that you guys could rent out, that you guys could profit from it. right? Think about the people that actually live in those neighborhoods that rely on the car. They come on middle of the night looking for parking. I don't know. I don't understand. You understand, right? How difficult is it, right, for people to find parking, right, at nighttime, right? Some people have to park so many blocks away just to take the train back to get to their car. Okay, you guys haven't done those research. You talk about profit, right? Once you guys make the profit, what are you guys doing to give back to the community? Are you guys have provide something to the community because you took 2 spots away from them?
I can touch on, Jerry, your question. You're correct. We have not done a survey of individuals or business owners to find out about the needs. But what we do know is that there's a really high percentage of the population in the community district that doesn't own a car at all. And so our intent is to provide a transportation option for those people who might not be able to get everywhere they need to go on transit or may need to use a car infrequently. So that's the intent, and that hopefully those shared cars then can help people who do own a car may not need access to a car, because as we know, personal car ownership is really expensive.
Well, yes, I do agree. But also, if you know the neighborhood, a lot of people do not register car in the neighborhood, right? So if you're looking at data of a cars registered in certain neighborhoods or insurance and stuff, those number again is wrong. Unless you really hit the ground, see what's going on, it's different. Again, great that we're sitting behind the desk and somebody doing the research. Oh, this neighborhood needs this because according to it, this data is correct. But I'm gonna tell you right now, data is not 100% correct. Depends how you get data. If you get trash data, you get trash result. By the way, I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking the program. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely understand. The information we use is by zip code. So you're correct, not a car registration by block or something like that. It's by zip code. But to your other question about what we're doing for community, like how we're giving back, most of what we're planning to do is the discounts. So making sure that we can continually provide more affordable services. So that's one thing. And then the educational materials, right, is like making sure people understand about their car share options. And so things like the accessibility options and, just
you mentioned NYCHA, right? Discount for NYCHA, but knowing that neighborhood, I don't think there's a lot of NYCHA building over there, right? How would they benefit? The people actually live in those apartments. How do they benefit from that? Again, if you're not NYCHA, you're not getting a discount. I could tell you I'm not getting a discount, right? Because what my range of salary. Okay.
Yeah,
again,
Jerry, that's a very good point. It works very much like the city bike station, in which we do give NYCHA residents a discount as well. And the point is to build a network. And so even though these locations may not be placed near a NYCHA housing, it is still accessible to them with a discount.
But again, there's no people living in those NYCHA building, right? So how you benefit the people that actually live in that neighborhood?
So one of the things, a slide that you guys, this is our first time seeing the slides. If you could send them over so that we have them, since we're in the window of, like, you could send it tonight or tomorrow morning. And you have the information around income so that we can have that. And you mentioned the NYCHA discount, but you also mentioned income. I believe, right? Didn't you say working low income, that there's a discount? So just providing all that information so we can review it. Jerry, I'm going to take facilitator's privilege and jump to Cynthia, and then Diana, and then Gambino. Thank you.
Hi. I have a few things to state. One, I think it's extremely disrespectful that we're hearing this for the first time on October 24th and expect feedback to you by October 30th. Respectfully, Emily, let me finish. Yes. Thank you that you could comment. While I do acknowledge that you sent the email September 15th, Katie was very clear that this was the first time you made yourselves available for the meeting. So it wasn't lack of us not reaching out, it was lack of your availability. The community needs to hear this. You have done no surveys with the community. You have not reached out to residents of that street. You have not reached out to the bid. There's businesses on that avenue that depend on people who go to visit them in cars for parking. While 2 spots may not seem like a lot to you, piggybacking on what Jerry said earlier, parking is extremely challenging in this district. Every single day, 2 to 3 hours circling to find the spot for residents who live here and do own a car. And Adrian will, some of them will respectfully keep owning a car. While I see your data, there's also 2 car services, one on 44th and one on 45th for people who do need occasional use of the car. So to me, I'm very perplexed why you even would pick Sunset Park when we have other transportation options besides public transportation. Why not a municipal parking lot or a lot that's closer to like Costco, renting out spaces from them? You're taking up street parking, where street parking is already at a premium. And all this is going to do is cause more stress for people who own vehicles currently in the neighborhood, and particularly those 2 blocks. The impact on the bid, on the businesses and current people of the community is going to be huge. And to say, well, you have until October 30th because we emailed you, is ridiculous. And I think, frankly, disrespectful. I think you should allow more time so this could be presented at the entire board meeting so that more community members could hear it. This is a committee meeting where traditionally you don't get large participation. So I do think that this is very disingenuous of DOT to come and say, well, we're informing you.
Yeah,
so really
noted.
have no feedback to give you back, because Katie asked, yeah, well, you could give us feedback, but your tone and your use of words, we're informing you, like you're telling us what you're doing in our neighborhood, and then saying this is what's going to happen, to me is very disengaging and inequitable in a community that already gets tons of things just told to them. And this fake engagement to me is pretty insulting. Thank you.
Thank you. And all of these notes are being taken and will be taken back. Again, the 45 days was just for a deadline for a reply and hearing back from you, from the board, on what the board wants to do. So this is why we're here. We're collecting all of the feedback that you're giving us. It's given to Justin and Adrian. But also, again, this is an informational meeting as well. And so we can discuss locations, we can discuss where we would like to see it. But again, that this presentation was informational.
Okay, and this is gonna come up. You're giving outside people reserved parking spots on the street and charging them a price. Why not do that to current car owners? As a current car owner, I would pay the, what is it, Katie, 470? How much are they paying?
$475 is the permit cost, right? That is paid for a reserved spot.
For the year?
Well, I'm just repeating back what was sent by you guys by email. So if you want to jump in, Justin.
Yeah, no, it's just we have an annual permit period, and it's a $470, $5. Yes.
So I would pay $475 a year as a car owner. And yeah, I'm sure many other car owners, Sammy with you, I see other people would do that. So they get a privilege and I don't, and I live.
And that's a conversation that is above us, and that is more legislative. And so if you would like to see that, or would like to leave that comment, that's something that you should bring up with your council member and your elected officials.
Yeah, but you're here today, Emily, so we're bringing it up.
I understand, but that's again, that's something that is legislative and out of DOT's control. And so if you do have a comment that you would like to give regarding reserved spots, that's something that your elected officials should be the ones hearing.
I will make sure I do that. And Adrian, why here? You still didn't explain why here specifically. To me, you haven't proven a need that this is even something we want or need in Sunset Park, more importantly.
Understood, and we're taking your comments, and we'll get back to the board with more information.
Oh, okay. So there was a question around, a suggestion that Cynthia had around Costco, which is basically, a large parking lot that's a site. You have to cross the very dangerous 3rd Avenue, which is an issue which we're all trying to work on, but that is a spot, and whether or not that would be something that you guys would consider. That's on 39th. That's just off of the the train as well, and several bus lines. So what you're hearing is a request for alternative sites. And Emily, we are providing comments, but we're going to have additional ones, I'm sure.
Yes.
And so we'll be providing those to you as well.
Yeah, so there's no timeline for comments. It was just 45 days to hear back from the board on how to move. Did you want a presentation? Did you just want to send a letter? Did you just want to provide comments by email? And so that's what the 45-day period is.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask, as we keep going this to everyone that's here, if you're, I want you to feel heard, but just like if you're adding to the conversation, if you've already heard someone making that comment, just maybe it's already been said. And so just ask if you're going to add a new perspective or a new comment. But if someone's already said it, then just trust that it's already been said. Diana and then Gambino.
So my first question is whether or not you considered any off-street spaces for this siting, and if not, why not?
So I can give a quick comment on that, and then I'll turn it over to Adrian. So we as a DOT do have off-street spaces as a part of our program in the municipal lots. And the car share companies have the opportunity to choose between those off-street spaces and on-street spaces. We as a DOT do not partner or pay for parking with private entities at this point, but I think that Adrian can potentially say more about the get arounds off-street programs, because there are numerous car share places that are in off-street lots already. The idea behind the program is that those off-street spaces where they're able to locate have not been traditionally in all neighborhoods of the city. They've been more concentrated around Manhattan and the private parking garages that are there. And so the point of our program is to expand access to this transportation mode beyond where there are off-street places and just to get into more parts of the community. And that's why I think we're going for some of these on-street spaces that seem to be more in the community and not the places where they've been traditionally concentrated. Excuse me. But Adrian, can you please talk a little bit more about your off-street private partnerships in the city?
Sure. So Get Around, like Justin alluded to, does work with private entities. So hotels, gas stations, developers, lots of different entities. Where we've had challenges, just like Justin mentioned in the city, is that the majority of those off-street locations where Get Around has been located have been concentrated in Manhattan. That's just where the concentration of those partners seem to be. And so that makes it not really representative for all the city. I mean, it would be really cost prohibitive to try to access a car share vehicle if you're traveling far distances. So our intent is to spread Get Around cars throughout the city in all 5 boroughs, not just in Manhattan. And so that's why we're utilizing the on-street program that DOT has. So I think there was a note about how we're choosing the locations. So we do look for access to other modes, and that's so it's easy for someone to get to a car share vehicle and they don't have to walk for an hour, hopefully cross dangerous streets, right? Where we want to put them in safe, visible locations. If there are recommendations for other areas in the district, we can certainly consider those.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at parking garages on Google Maps right now. There are multiple in Sunset Park. There's a cluster of 5 of them along 3rd Avenue in the 20s. There are options, and I'm not convinced that this is the best use of on-street parking space. I also want to ask, I've used Get Around before. I haven't had the greatest experience with Get Around, so I would like to know, these cars that'll be parked there, are they owned by Get Around, or is this people renting out their cars through the Get Around platform?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Get Around does not own our vehicles, but the DOT has pretty strict requirements for what vehicles are allowed in the spaces, meaning that when a car is in the space, it has to be fully available for car sharing. So an individual user can't have their own personal car and sometimes use it for car share and sometimes use it for themselves. The vehicles that are in these spaces are fully dedicated to car share. And because of that, we work with businesses that have multiple vehicles that can be fully dedicated to car share. So we work with fleet providers, although we don't own the vehicles ourselves.
Right. So I've definitely encountered situations in the past where I've rented vehicles from Get Around and they were not necessarily well maintained. And in one case, one was not even safe to drive, and Get Around was unable to provide me with a replacement vehicle. And so I'm wondering if through this program, we're actually creating a substandard level of car availability for an underserved community instead of providing cars that are actually part of a company that is maintaining them actively instead of counting on a third party to ensure that maintenance happens. So I'm going to say I'm fully against this idea. That's all.
Thank you. We'll take your notes and we'll get back to the board.
Okay, and then again, we've got another agenda item, old business, and then public comment. We've got folks who've been waiting, so we're losing people steadily. Gambino, go to you.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm trying to make this quick. I just wanted to say I do back Cynthia Felix and Catherine, Chairman Catherine, I back you guys up, and having a foreseeable time frame to structure all this implementation of car share out, making sure we in the community are informed of everything that's going to be happening and site locations importantly. And it is important for our community to have input for sure. I have two questions following that. So if these projects do get implemented around here, one, for public safety, I am concerned of the location on 44th Street. So sometimes there are groups of people hanging around over there. So in that particular location, I was just wondering and curious to how car share keeps people safe and from being harassed while trying to get these cars for rent. And the second question is, can you guys be specific on what type of penalties any resident might go through if they have an accident, or if you guys could give us an examples to what kind of penalties car share users will go through if any issues arise with the car. Thank you.
Justin, I can go ahead if you, and then I'll.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, I can take maybe the first question about the sort of enforcement around the cars. And I mean, Adrian maybe has some more to add to it. But we don't have any special kind of enforcement that goes on with the vehicles in terms of maintaining them. They are, as I alluded to earlier, like the spaces are being maintained. So there is someone who is coming there to monitor them. And I believe they may have some equipment in the vehicle which allows for just, tracking, maybe some GPS or something of that sort, but there's not any sort of special entities that come to ensure sort of safe passage or anything of that sort, unfortunately. But and Adrian can speak more to the other parts of the question.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. Around safety. So you can, if you want to use a car share vehicle, you can book a trip from your home or an office from any location. You don't have to be right near the vehicle. In the event you decide you see a car share vehicle and want to book it right away, you can do that. But it's almost instantaneous. Even if you have never used Get Around before, uploading your driver's license to being ready to drive a car can be 3 minutes. So in that way, there should not be like a long period of time you need to be outside of the vehicle if you are getting or renting a vehicle. The 44th Street location, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. Penalties, so there is insurance that comes with a trip, and if you were in an incident or something, you would be covered. as a user, we know that many people don't own a car, right? So they wouldn't have their own automobile insurance. And so that's part of what Getaround offers. A penalty, let's say you deliver it late and you don't extend your trip, there are small penalties for things like that. And I can share more details if you want to go through them.
Thank you very much for that information. And yes, we would like to have a further amounts of timing so we could actually present these issues with you guys, and please provide us with the feedback as well as what you guys find to be more considerable to you and considerable for us, so we could work with you guys. Thank you.
And I'll jump to Sam, and then we'll move to any questions from the public. Sam?
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask, how would these spaces be identified?
So there's two ways. There's a special sign for car share, and it will have a logo of the Get Around company on it, and it will be put on the post just like other DOT signs. And then also there will be painting on the ground to designate this as a car share only space, and it outlines the corners of the space.
The vehicles also have decals on them. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but the cars also have decals that have the logo.
Thank you, Adrian.
So what if I lived on that block, let us say, and I come home and I'm looking for parking. I find the parking, it happens to be one of the car share, and I take that space. What is my penalty for doing that? And part two to that, me as the car share renter now, what do I do now when that space is not available?
So
these are things to consider.
Yeah, as the individual who parks in the space, well, after the initial sort of waiver period, when the signage gets changed, we'll be working with NYPD to make sure they're notified of the updates for these locations. You are subject to being ticketed if you park in the zone. As for the car share operators, the cars are street legal, and so they can be parked at other places in the city. They report those to us, and then once the spaces become open again, like, we can move the cars back in. But that's the process that we utilized during the pilot, and what we plan to utilize going forward.
Yeah, I have a personal opinion. I don't see this going forward. I think the community would give a pushback, let us say, to losing 4 parking spots. I know it may be seen as just 4 parking spots, but the community would certainly give pushback on this. This is unfair to this community to begin with. And again, I know this is just informational, but we'd like you to take that back with you as well.
Yeah, and Sam, your questions are the right ones too, where I'm just thinking about, like, enforcement is non-existent in this community when it comes to enforcement, which DOT's been on the record on with us for. But then I'm hearing that if there is enforcement, there would be enforcement from NYPD ticketing for neighbors parking in these car share spaces. And that's not going to go so well. So I think that there's a lot to consider, just as a way to wrap up and move forward. I feel like I also have to make some of these comments. I work in climate and sustainability, and I'm really focused on modes of transit that move people out of their cars. That's like what I do for a living. And other forms of just like decarbonizing and getting off fossil fuels. So I know car share, right? So I feel the need to say that in the context of this conversation, because the way in which this came about is the thing that is very challenging and troubling. And we are trying to turn a corner with working with DOT. we're trying to turn a corner in under this new New York City Department of Transportation Commissioner, and we would really like to be able to have there be real partnership. And so this is just an example of something that the way it's come about is not the way that we should be operating. So as we are looking at the next couple of days, there's been a lot of feedback that's come in. Adrian, I heard, you know, from your lips, right? Like the words that considering other sites is a consideration, and you've heard a couple of ideas and you've heard a couple of considerations. I think that's the direction we're heading in. You guys took notes, we'll take notes, we might hear from other people. I still need to turn to public comment just to get if there's anything else, but I would just, you know, urge the powers that be that we are trying to improve the quality of life for our neighbors. We're trying to reduce air pollution, improve asthma. We're trying to improve access and equitable outcomes. And we also need a process to be reflective of our community. So you're hearing a little bit of that tonight. So with that, I'm going to move us towards wrapping up this portion of the conversation. But I do just want to see if there's anybody in public comment that had any questions with whoever's left. You can put your hand up if you're in the public. Full attendee list, just 3. Okay, so don't see anyone's hands up. So Emily, we'll put this down, but we'll send you a note tomorrow with reflecting some of these things with a request for consideration for these sites to be revisited.
Yeah,
Diane, you have a burning question?
Yeah, Gabino had a good question in the chat. I was wondering if you could address it.
Thank you. I will. Okay, thank you for this. Will a vote for the site selection be necessary? I think my takeaway, and I'd love for this to be corrected, is that we provided a lot of feedback about the sites that were proposed, and that we're asking DOT and Adrian's team to revisit those. That's the next step. So we're not going to take a vote on these because we're actually providing comments that we'd like the sites to be reconsidered. That's Emily, is that
yeah,
is that where
yeah, that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Fantastic. So thank you from everybody who came for that last presentation. We're going to go back and revisit our agenda items from 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue from the last meeting. For folks that are still on, I appreciate it. So we'll do old business and then we'll go to public comment. Okay, so old business. So we had a meeting October 6th. John, I'm gonna need your help. We talked about, we had the presentation from 3rd Avenue about 3rd Avenue, the EDC project. And this was looking at a couple of the different site phases of the projects, ripping out the old rail lines, the cobblestones, putting streets in, trees, lighting. So just to remind everyone what that presentation was from October 6th. In that presentation, there were a couple things that we heard. For example, we had raised that we had wanted bollards on 3rd Avenue to protect pedestrians. This was something that we had raised back in March. We brought this up on October 6th. EDC told us that DOT said that they would evaluate it later on the bollards. John and I are chatting again, just thinking about safety, and we're thinking that we would like to put, and this will get to 4th Avenue in a second, but we would like to put a letter together from this committee, and I'll talk about 4th in a second, but about putting that in writing, a request for the bollards that we had already asked for in the first design, that EDC said that they would ask for, and were told by DOT that they would be evaluated later, basically waiting for something to happen. So that's that. So the DOT request on bollards on 3rd, and then I'll just get to 4th Avenue in a second. There was also the presentation on 4th Avenue. This is all of the different construction and phasing that's ongoing, starting from 65th Street all the way down to 17th Street. In the meeting that we had in the presentation, we raised a bunch of the different issues that are coming up around during the construction. So specifically during the construction, that folks are that DOT, and this again goes to bikes, but bikes and pedestrians, that DOT is not honoring and not upholding the DOT is not honoring and not upholding the New York City law that requires that they provide a safe passage. This has now come up in multiple meetings with, or in multiple different forums. The city council member sent a letter to DOT, a bike advocacy, Bike South Brooklyn sent a letter to DOT basically saying we need to provide safe passage on 4th Avenue. So similarly, John and I were chatting about if we should have, in the same note to DOT about having a safe access during construction on 4th Avenue. And then the last thing, and Cynthia, I see your hand up, in that letter is concern that was raised. So in the presentation from the 6th, we had a presentation of what's happening on 4th Avenue, and it appears that there's a discrepancy between what was presented to the community in 2017 about what was going to happen on 4th and the design we have now. We're not quite sure. We're not technical experts, you know, we're not transportation engineers, and it's 300 pages. But we want to have some sort of point of information, confirmation on DOT about like the design that we're actually seeing now being built. Is this, you know, the design that had been presented to the community, and then is it, you know, understanding if it's the safest design. So that was a mouthful, but just to reiterate that we wanted to share with this committee that we're thinking about writing this letter to Department of Transportation as follow-up, 3rd and 4th Avenue for safety. And I'll stop talking. John, do you want to add anything? And then we can just go to any questions.
Yeah, sure. I just want to add that, yeah, in terms of the providing the temporary bike lane, that was kind of interesting because one of the other project across the street from the board has one, and so does the 5th Avenue Committee project that is at the end of the DOT project. So I understand I believe there must be some kind of like feasibility reason. So I would be interested in seeing if we can get that addressed by a letter. So yeah, I echo all your points, Katie. I don't want to say too much because it's already late. So
yeah, okay, Cynthia.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. So on 50th Street and 4th, they are doing the construction and has become an issue for safe passage for pedestrians crossing from one side of 4th Avenue, the 3rd Avenue side going to 5th Avenue, because either cars or trucks that are turning are moving. They don't have bullocks or anything to make a passage for people. They just have cones with yellow string, with yellow tape. So people are moving them out of the way. They're throwing them on the side. So as a result, there is no barrier between a car and a person. So I have seen women with baby carriages almost get hit. People with walkers almost get hit. When I see it, I put it back, but I'm not the transit police nor their enforcer, and I shouldn't have to do that. So if you do write a letter, can you include that? Because it is a very dangerous situation. They should then have no left turns on 50th Street while this is happening, because it's posing a danger to people trying to cross from one side of the street to the other. There's no barrier, just the construction on both sides of the street.
Yeah, I think we should include that. And then if board members or community members, Jeremy, if you get any other calls that come in from people to the community board about construction and safety, we can add that to the letter as well.
I'll send you pictures.
Yeah, pictures are great. We will use the pictures. Okay. So that's just not a vote, not a resolution, but just kind of giving everyone an update that that's an action that we want to take, and we want to be The point of this, again, is to be also on the record to share this is coming from the community board. You've already had the council member send something. You've already had a bike advocacy group. We need to have as much voices on this as possible, but then we also need action to actually happen. And so with that, we're going to move to public comment, but I just want to preview our next meeting that we have, which is coming up quite quickly. It's going to be with, I believe that's the next one, Cynthia, with you and the Public Safety Committee on November 12th. Is that right? It's a joint meeting about safety and enforcement, and it's with the precinct.
Yes, and I believe it's the 14th, though. Let me check.
Okay. So the call to action is that please, if you see something, if you take a picture, call, flag it with 311, and then send it to Jeremy. Send it to the community board. So this gives us a chance to kind of aggregate things, especially ahead of November 14th. And this relates to any kind of, at least on our side too, safety, traffic, and safe passage. Okay, and now we will go to the last bit, which is public comment. And if you have public comment, please raise your hand so that we can call on you. I don't see any hands up from anyone else. Just making sure. So with that, we can close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Wait, before you go, one logistical thing. Do we have a deadline for when we are getting these comments for the letter? And is there, for Jeremy, is there any procedural things we need to know about writing this kind of letter?
Well, procedurally, it needs to go through the board. So whether you want to author it, or you want me to author it under your supervision, it would go out from the board on our letterhead, typically with either Julio's signature, my signature, or both, or the chair's signature, or combinations of that. And if I heard Emily correctly, we just had to set up a meeting within 45 days. There isn't an actual time frame, although I would not put it much past the next board meeting.
Okay, cool. So
yeah, I think we're almost conflating a couple different things, right? So tonight we gave a lot of comments on the car share program that I haven't seen the 45-day notice anywhere. I went back to look at original emails. I don't know where that came from, but I'm happy to hear back from them. But I think we sent a message that's loud and clear around site selection. Jeremy, we can put that in an email. The thing I think we're talking about is related to 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue, specifically from the meetings from October 6th.
So gotcha. I would say, well, time-wise, particularly for both of them, since they're both under construction already, or soon to be, with 3rd and 39th, we should get that out as soon as possible. But again, protocol would be it would go through the office.
Okay, sounds good.
So is there a deadline then we're looking to get these comments before sending? Next Monday, this Friday? And
I would say the deadline would be whenever we get that letter drafted. We could always add stuff in.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so we'll include some of the things.
So get it to us as soon as possible.
Yeah, sounds good. Good. Well, thanks everyone for hanging on.
All right, good night.
All right, thank you all.
Good night.
Right.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.